Hello everybody. Today I want to talk about transgenderism and where I think it comes from. That is gender dysmorphia and gender identity disorder. Here I would like to say that I already made a video about sexual orientation, and for me there is a difference between sexual orientation and this gender identity disorder, gender dysmorphia, because you can think of yourself as a male, but you can be attractive. So I believe that orientation has something to do with blood. It is an instinct that is programmed in your blood. So that research about sexual orientation was published in National Geographic. It was by so mercury poisoning makes birds homosexual. Mercury poisoning makes birds homosexual. Metal may influence sexual development in white ibises, expert says. Male birds that ate mercury-contaminated food show surprising homosexual behavior, scientists have found. In a recent experiment in captive white ibises, many of the males exposed to the metal chose other males as mates. These male-male pairs did everything that a heterosexual pair would do, said the leader Peter Frederick, a wildlife ecologist at the University of Florida in Gainesville. They built their nest, copulated together, stayed together on the nest for a month. Even though there were no eggs, they did the whole 9 yards. Wild white ibises, among the most common birds in Florida's Everglades, are exposed to daily mercury through their diets of crustaceans and other small invertebrates. Recent pollution control measures have grossly reduced the contamination, Frederick says. White ibises experience very major reproductive problems at pretty low levels of mercury. Contaminated birds produce fewer babies. During the 5-year experiment, Frederick and colleague Neil Mini Jayasena divided 160 young captive white ibises into 4 groups of equal numbers of males and females. During the study period, male and female birds were all allowed to choose their mates in experimental first. According to the study of all studies that involved reproduction, the birds took a male and female, put them in a cage. Our finding by a novel is the first time anybody looked for it. Started at around 90 days of age, each of 3 groups was fed a diet containing either low, medium, or high amounts of mercury, based on realistic range of exposure in the wild. The 4th control group ate mercury-free food. Once the birds had reached sexual maturity at around a year old, homosexual bonding increased in all 3 groups exposed to mercury. This behavior led to a 13 to 15% decline in the number of young compared to the mercury-free control group. The metal also impacted heterosexual couples. Overall, female birds exposed to mercury yielded 35% fewer babies than the control group. Mercury is a known endocrine disruptor, a substance that mimics or blocks the production of natural estrogen. In this case, exposed male birds' bodies produce more estrogen than testosterone as compared with control birds. Though hormones can affect sexual behavior, estrogen or testosterone alone usually don't influence how the bird chooses a mate. This makes Frederick speculate that mercury exposure during the bird's sexual development may play a role. Mercury mysteries remain. Many unknowns remain about the study and mercury effects, Frederick warned. There is a great tendency to extrapolate the study in an offhand fashion to mean, oh, if you eat mercury, you're going to be gay, he said. So this was a prelude to my theory now about why I think this phenomenon called transgenderism happens everywhere around the world, but specifically in the United States. So my theory is such that if suggestion that mercury causes people to divert their sexuality and disrupts their endocrine system of birds, animals, and humans, then something must also make people identify as an opposite gender. So as I was researching it and I was thinking about it for a very long time, and I have been analyzing a lot of information, but this all comes down to this. Again, I would like to repeat that transgenderism, identification of yourself as another gender, is different from sexuality. I think that sexuality is in the blood. It's a program on the level of instinct in your blood. But when it comes to transgenderism, it's to the point you want to mutilate yourself and become a different gender. So I think that the only thing that differs Russia and the United States, for example, what is different in Russia as comparing to the United States is corn. Corn is what I call maize. So maize is this yellow substance, and they grow it a lot in the United States. So people in the United States and in Americas in general have this history deep-rooted into what is called Mesoamerican tradition, that is growing and cultivating this corn. So, for example, Americans are famous for eating popcorn, having this corn syrup, having all these protein shakes and protein powders. And this is what is different in the diet between United States and Russia. And the chips that are made with corn, also flour that is made with corn, and lots and lots of other ingredients That's the only difference between Russia and the United States. Even this so-called keto diet they use things to process this whole stuff from corn, and what do you think they do to isolate this protein from soy? So you think you just want to eat something protein to grow muscle, but you actually eating this byproduct of corn. They have to go through a whole series of things to extract this concentrated protein. They have to use something called hexane. That's petroleum byproduct. So basically I believe that America now is growing this corn not in order to feed everybody because they want to kill everybody, but they do it rather because they want to produce this diesel fuel and other types of fuel byproduct from this stuff, and then they pretend that they pump these molten dinosaurs from deep underground. So basically they use corn to produce fuel and then lie about it when they say they take it from oil from deep underground. And that's basically why the things are this way, and also why there used to be single house farms in the United States, and that shifted into big cities, and this diet and all of that, because American families usually have more than one car, while in other parts of the world people have one car per family usually, and they use public transport as well. But anyways, I digress from this because I just wanted to stress importance of this corn for them, as this is something that is actually producing fuel. But so all these diet shakes and all these their diet powders, protein bars, veggie keto diet stuff, ketogenic. So anyways, I wanted to say that I believe what they do and what they hide from people is that they have all this protein from corn, and it's not as simple as that, and there is something very sinister hiding in between that. So there was a time when there was a Soviet Union time where there was communism in Russia, and there was a person named Khrushchev who was actually a Ukrainian, and he came to United States with a visit, and he wanted to apply all this method of growing maize, corn, in Russia, in the USSR at that time, but it didn't work. It didn't work as successfully as it worked in the United States. So why it didn't work is this thing I think they use to as a fertilizer. So anyways, I think that they use something like processed dead people's bodies, dead people's meat as a fertilizer, a secret ingredient for why corn grows so well. So basically what I think happens with this plant is that these plants with their root system, it absorbs protein from a dead person. I don't think they do it with American dead people. I think they import it from countries like Indonesia. So that's how they do it. For example, let's say there are places in Indonesia or, for example, in Mexico where they steal human bodies after they are being buried. And what they do is that they separate, for example, the bones from the meat, and they process the meat from the dead bodies, and this meat is basically protein, and they dry it, they turn it into powder, whatever they do in these factories secretly. It's always done secretly, and then they sell it as some kind of a powder or fertilizer from Indonesia to the United States, for example. And basically you have this powder made from human tissue, from human meat, inserted into the soil, and then they plant this corn, and this human body serves as a fertilizer, and this plant absorbs human flesh. That's how it works. I think it has a lot to do with this Aztec and Mayan, Mesoamerican, ancient cultures that knew about this. They had this maize god that were associated with human sacrifices, and those who traveled to American continent from there, from Europe, they thought that the certain appearance and character of those who lived in America was due to their diet, and their diet was basically maize. And these corn gods are very particular, and you can read about them, but what's very interesting is that they tried to hide that Obama comes from his ancestry originally comes from Indonesia, because he definitely has this appearance, and they tried to he even looks like the president of Indonesia, and they tried to hide this for some reason, and I often wondered why they are hiding it, why they are hiding that he's Indonesian, why they try to present him as African. So some peoples in that Indonesia and some peoples in Mexico as well have these weird customs where after a certain period they undig their relatives, and they celebrate, they place them at the table, and they celebrate them, the mummified bodies of the relatives. And in some cases, Indonesians just try to bury their dead somewhere in the rocks that are not available to approach, and somewhere in the woods, in the middle of the trees, especially babies, and they try to guard them so that nobody would steal the bodies. Also, recently there was an earthquake there in Indonesia on the 4th of April, and the graves were open due to earthquakes, and the graves were all empty. There were no dead bodies reportedly, and no coffins even. So somebody must have stolen and processed them all. Yeah, Sentiotl, that's the name of the god. And there are all these nightmarish stories by Stephen King, Children of Corn. There are movies like that. So Shiloh-nan, 5th of April, it's celebrated as a maize goddess of they were decorated with blood drops and home altars and statues of goddesses with flowers. In the middle of summer, there were human sacrifices in order to please appease to the goddesses and collect good crop of maize later on. Every September, a young girl would be sacrificed. The priest beheaded her, collected her blood, and spilled it on the statue of the goddess. Further, the dead body was skinned, and this skin was worn by the priest. Chicomecoatl, Shkanil, Shiloh-nan. So, surprisingly, Angelina Jolie named her firstborn Shiloh, and it became transgender. And there is also Xilonan, something called Maya maize god. Like other Mesoamerican people, the traditional Maya recognize in their staple crop maize a vital force with which they strongly identify. San Francisco capstone depicted the tonsured maize god residing in a whale. Gulf Coast maize myth. In a general sense, maize relates to the day Qn, ripe of ripeness. The appearance of the tonsured maize god is connected to the base date of the long count 4 Ahau and 8 Kamku. The head of the tonsured maize god serves to denote the number 1, that of the foliated maize god the number 8. The tonsured maize god is sometimes found associated with the lunar crescent and may therefore have played a role in the division of the lunar count. His head seems to occur in glyph C of the lunar series, the Maya moon goddess. So QN, and it seems like QAnon has something to do to this. Senteoter. During rituals, The god wears nephrite skirt and another one called god N is associated with classic god, which is number 3, embodiment of number 3, also god of maize. In Aztec mythology, god of the sun and goddess of the moon had a son called Tzintleotl, god of the maize. According to the legend, god of the maize was cut into pieces due to envy by another deity. As he was cut into pieces, these pieces turned later on into the maize, corn, and other useful plants. The Mexican name maize, Tlaoli, means our body, our meat. So anyways, Tzintleotl, flower prince, was the main Aztec god of the maize. The name Tzintleotl is pronounced as Zintai-Atul, means the god of the corn cobs. Other gods related to this is the goddesses Xylonen and Chicomicoatl, 7 snakes, and Shipitotec, cruel god of fertility. Tzintleotl was a son of Tlazotliotl or Tochi, the goddess of fertility and giving birth, and as Xochipilli, he was husband of Xochiquetzal, first woman which gave birth. Many Aztec gods, the maize god had dual aspect, male and female, many resources. Naua, this is Aztec language, informed that god of maize was born as a goddess, and only after time he became god of the male gender, named Tzintleotl, with female analog goddess Chicomicoatl. Tzintleotl and Chicomicoatl observed different stages of maize growth. According to a story which was collected by French monk and scientist Bernardino de Sahagún during Spanish colonial period, Tzintleotl made a trip to the underworld and returned with crops like cotton, sweet potato, and agave drink. All this he gave to people. In this story of Tzintleotl, he is sometimes associated with Venice, morning star. The 4th month of Aztec calendar, Huitzotzli, Big Dream, was dedicated to the gods of maize, Tzintleotl and Chicomicoatl. In this month, which started about 30th of April, different ceremonies were held which were dedicated to corn. In order to honor those gods, people did self-sacrifices. They were spilling their bloods and they were putting bloods on their houses. Young women decorated themselves with corns, seeds, and so anyways, this is also 27th of September.